Ilara sat quietly in the corner of the marketplace, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the ground. The sun had barely risen, but the air already smelled of dust, sweat, and greed. Her stomach twisted with shame as the crowd around her whispered and laughed. She was the youngest daughter of a noble family, yet her parents had decided that she was nothing more than a burden. Today, they would sell her like cattle. She could hear the harsh voices of the merchants discussing her as if she were a simple object to trade. "Not much use to anyone," one said, and another laughed cruelly. Ilara's cheeks burned, not from the cold wind but from humiliation. She had always been heavier than her siblings, and in a world that prized beauty and wealth above all else, that was enough to make her family cast her aside. Her heart pounded, but she did not cry. Tears were useless. They could not undo what had been decided. She swallowed her fear and kept her head high. Then he came. The marketplace fell silent before she even saw him. The shadows seemed to gather around him like dark smoke drawn to a flame. He moved with a grace that made the world slow down, tall, imposing, and impossibly beautiful, with eyes that glimmered like polished onyx. The people stepped back, whispers fleeing from their lips like frightened birds. Ilara had never seen such a man. Something in her chest fluttered, a strange mix of fear and curiosity. "This one?" one of the merchants asked, bowing slightly. "The fat daughter? She is worthless." The man's gaze fell on Ilara and the world seemed to hush. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and yet strangely seen. "She's priceless," he said, his voice low and smooth like the sound of silk over stone. The words made Ilara's heart skip a beat. Priceless him? Surely he was joking. She was no one, just a girl too heavy, too ordinary, too unloved. Yet the way he looked at her with no mockery or disgust made something inside her lift. The merchants looked at one another, confused. "Priceless? Who are you to say such a thing?" "I am Varric," he said simply, "and I decide her fate." That single declaration ended the auction. He had not bought her. He had claimed her. The crowd murmured and moved away, whispers trailing behind him like a storm cloud. Ilara was led away from the market, her legs shaking. Her heart pounded not with fear but with a strange, exciting anticipation. She did not understand why, but something about this man made her feel alive, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. Varric's home was unlike anything Ilara had ever seen. The castle rose from the edge of the forest, dark stone towers spiraling into the sky, windows that gleamed with an inner light, and gates carved with strange, flowing symbols. Shadows moved along the walls as if alive, and a chill followed her with every step. "You will stay here," Varric said as they entered, his eyes fixed on her. "You will learn. You will grow. And you will be safe," Ilara nodded, but her mind raced. Safe? How could she be safe when the world wanted to cast her away? Still, something in his words gave her hope, tiny but real. Days passed, and life in the castle was strange and new. She was given rooms filled with books, maps, and strange artifacts. Shadows seemed to whisper her name, and sometimes she thought she saw them move like living things. Varric did not explain much, but he watched her constantly, his presence both intimidating and comforting. At first, Ilara was terrified. She had grown up thinking the world hated her, that her body and her existence were a joke. But here with him, she was treated differently. He asked her questions, tested her mind, and encouraged her to think, to explore, to discover. "You have a sharp mind," he said one evening as they walked through a moonlit courtyard. "Do not let the world convince you otherwise." Ilara felt her chest tighten. Nobody had ever said such things to her. Her siblings had mocked her. Her parents had sold her. But Varric believed in her, and she wanted to believe in herself too. Yet fear lingered. She knew little about him, about what he truly was. The shadows in his castle whispered secrets she could not understand. Nights were filled with strange sounds, the wind carrying voices and cries. Sometimes she awoke to find him standing silently at the doorway of her room, watching her sleep. She wanted to be afraid, but she could not stop feeling a strange warmth at his gaze. One night, curiosity led her to a hidden part of the castle, a corridor she had never seen before. The walls were lined with mirrors that did not reflect her properly. Her reflection was twisted, heavier, but also glowing with an inner light she had never noticed before. And then she saw it. A chamber filled with visions of her family. Scenes of her parents counting gold, laughing at her misery, planning to sell her. Her heart twisted with old pain, the betrayal fresh and sharp. But before despair could overwhelm her, a shadow moved behind her. Varric's presence filled the room. "They have done much to hurt you," he said softly. "But you are no longer theirs." Alara turned to him, tears threatening, but she held them back. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because," he said, his voice low, "I see what they cannot. I see you." The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, truly seen. Her body, her mind, her spirit, all recognized, all valuable. From that night on, their relationship began to change. Varric was stern but patient. He pushed her to learn, to explore her talents, to face the darkness around them. Alara grew stronger, not just in body but in mind and heart. The fear and shame that had followed her for years began to loosen its grip, but darkness still lingered. She knew the world outside the castle was cruel and unforgiving. She could not forget her family, their betrayal burning like a wound that would not heal, and she could not ignore the strange dark power that seemed to live in Varric, a power both terrifying and beautiful. One evening, as the moon rose high, casting silver light over the courtyard, Alara and Varric stood at the balcony looking out over the forest. The wind stirred the shadows, carrying a chill that touched her bones. "Will they come for me?" she asked quietly. "They may try," Varric said, "but they will fail. You are not alone anymore." Alara nodded, but her heart was heavy. She wanted to believe him, but fear clung to her like a shadow. Still, a spark had been lit within her, a spark of hope, of courage, of life. And then, in the deepest part of the night, she heard whispers beyond the castle walls, voices plotting and scheming. Something stirred in the forest, dark and ancient, something that had been waiting. Varric's eyes, black as midnight, met hers. "They think they can take you," he said, "but they have no idea what they are dealing with." Alara shivered, but not from fear alone. The thrill of adventure, of danger, and of discovery coursed through her veins. She realized then that her life was no longer ordinary. It would never be ordinary again. The night was full of shadows, secrets, and strange magic. And in the quiet moments, as the wind whispered through the towers, Alara understood one truth above all. She was no longer for sale. She was priceless, and someone at last believed it. The moon dipped behind the mountains, leaving the castle in silver and shadow. In that silence, a new chapter began, one of danger, of growth, and of a connection that neither fear nor cruelty could sever. But beyond the walls of the castle, in the dark forest where the shadows twisted and waited, something ancient and hungry stirred, and Alara knew, even without seeing it, that the real test of courage was about to begin. The castle lay quiet under the silver glow of the moon. Alara stood at the balcony, the cool wind brushing her hair. Since Varric had taken her from the marketplace, her life had changed beyond anything she could have imagined. She was learning, growing stronger, and understanding that the world was more than cruelty and whispers. But with strength came responsibility and danger. The shadows in the forest beyond the castle were restless. Alara could feel it in her bones, a dark pulse moving beneath the earth, ancient and patient. She had seen visions of it in the mirrors, faint but terrifying. And now, in the still of the night, the forest seemed alive, breathing, waiting. Varric joined her, silent and commanding, as if he had stepped from the darkness itself. His eyes, black as polished stone, scanned the horizon. "They are coming," he said quietly. Alara shivered, but not from fear. There was a thrill in knowing she could face them now. "Who?" she asked. "Your family," Varric said, "and others who seek power. They have been watching, waiting for the right moment." Ilara's stomach clenched. Her parents, the people who had sold her like an object, were still plotting against her. But she was not the same girl who had been led to the market with shame and tears. She had learned, she had grown, and she was ready. Days passed in preparation. Varric trained her in ways she had never imagined. She learned to read the signs of shadow and wind, to move quietly, to sense danger before it arrived. Her body became stronger, but her mind became sharper. She could anticipate threats, understand intentions, and make decisions quickly. "Your courage is rare," Varric said one evening, as they practiced in the moonlit courtyard. "Most would have given up long ago. Most would still be trembling in the market." Alara felt her heart lift. "I am not the girl they sold," she said softly. "No," Varric replied. "You are more than that. You are something they cannot understand." The words made her pulse quicken. It was strange, this feeling that someone saw her completely as she truly was. It was dangerous, too. She felt the weight of responsibility and the stirrings of something new, a bond that went beyond protection. The first attack came silently. Shadows slipped across the forest, moving with unnatural speed and intelligence. Elara heard whispers in the wind, plotting, cruel and sharp. Varric appeared beside her, alert and ready. "They have sent agents," he said. "We must not underestimate them." Elara nodded, gripping a small dagger Varric had given her. She felt fear, yes, but also power. She could move, strike, and defend herself. She could fight. The intruders appeared at the castle's edge, cloaked figures with dark intentions. But Elara and Varric were ready. She moved with agility, shadows bending around her as she guided them with the confidence she had never known. Varric struck with precision and strength, but Elara's role was equally vital. She used the knowledge she had gained to outsmart their attackers, leading them into traps, blocking their advances, and surprising them at every turn. By the time dawn broke, the intruders had fled, defeated and humiliated. Elara stood beside Varric, breathless but proud. "We did it," she whispered. Varric looked at her, pride and something deeper shining in his eyes. "No," he said softly. "You did it. You are not just my companion. You are my equal." The word sent a shiver through her. Equal. Someone finally treated her as a person, strong and valuable, not as a burden. The next weeks passed in a mix of learning and closeness. Varric shared stories of the ancient world, of kingdoms and creatures long forgotten, of shadows that held secrets older than humans themselves. Elara listened, fascinated, and slowly she began to understand him. Not just his power, but his loneliness, his longing for connection, and the weight of centuries he carried. In return, Elara shared herself, her fears, her dreams, and her heart. Varric listened, and for the first time in centuries, he felt something he thought impossible, a connection, warm and alive that eased the cold weight of eternity. One night, as they walked along the moonlit balcony, Varric spoke quietly. "I have walked the world for centuries, never trusting, never loving, and yet, with you I feel something I cannot name." Elara looked at him, heart racing. "Do you yet fear it?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly, shadows playing across his face. "Perhaps, but I will not let fear stop me now." The bond between them deepened, fragile but strong, like a candle flickering against the wind. They were drawn together by trust, respect, and an unspoken understanding that they would protect each other, no matter the cost. But danger was never far. One evening, a messenger arrived at the castle, cloaked in black and carrying a letter sealed with a mark Elara had seen in her visions. Her mother's seal. Varric took the letter, reading it carefully. His expression darkened. "They have gathered forces," he said. "They want you back, or they want you broken." Elara's heart clenched. The family that had sold her, that had scorned her all her life, was coming for her. But this time she was not helpless. "Then we will meet them," she said, her voice steady. "And we will show them they cannot control me." Varric nodded. "You have grown stronger than you know. And together, we are unstoppable." The final confrontation took place in the castle's grand hall. Shadows danced on the walls as figures moved through the doors, their intentions clear and cruel. But Elara was ready. She moved with purpose, using both the training and instincts she had gained. Varric was beside her, their movements synchronized, their bond unbreakable. Her family stepped forward, eyes wide with shock and fear. They had expected a frightened girl, someone to humiliate or control. Instead, they saw Elara standing tall, confident and radiant in her strength. "You sold me once," she said, voice steady. "But I am no longer yours to trade. I am priceless. And I belong to no one but myself." Her mother tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her father's face was pale, shame and disbelief etched deep. The room seemed to hold its breath as Elara's words echoed like a hammer against stone. The intruders, realizing they were defeated, tried to flee, but Varric's shadows moved like living walls, cutting off their escape. One by one, they were forced to retreat, powerless against the combined strength of Varric and Elara. When the hall fell silent, Elara turned to Varric. He looked at her with pride and admiration, and for a moment she saw something she had never expected: vulnerability, a softness behind the power. "You were amazing," he said, voice low, carrying warmth she had never heard from him before. Alara smiled, feeling the weight of years of pain lift slightly. "I am not the girl they thought I was," she said. "I am stronger. Because of you." Varric shook his head. "No, Alara, you were always strong. I only helped you see it." The bond between them was now unbreakable. They had faced danger, betrayal, and cruelty, and emerged victorious. But as they stood together, a shadow flickered beyond the castle walls, something ancient and waiting. Varric's eyes darkened. "The night is not over," he said. "There are forces beyond this kingdom that will challenge us, and they are awakening." Alara felt a thrill run through her. Fear and excitement mingled, but she knew one truth above all. She would face it all. With Varric by her side, she was ready. The moon rose high, casting silver light over the castle, illuminating the towers and the forests beyond. Shadows moved, whispering secrets of old. But inside the walls, Alara felt a warmth and strength she had never known. She was no longer the girl sold like cattle. She was priceless, and she knew it. And though the world beyond the castle waited with darkness, she was ready to meet it and fearless, unbroken, and with a heart open to love, courage, and adventure. The night stretched ahead, full of possibility, danger, and mystery. And Alara understood finally that her story had only just begun.